So in the final chapter of this talk, the Rebbe begins with one final question. As we discussed until now, Yaakov asked to sit in tranquility, and at first, the way we examined the midrashic analysis, it would seem that Hashem not only denied him, but then also gave him the onslaught of Yosef. Further in the talk, we came to see that Yaakov did receive the tranquility that he sought, and that was for the first 9 years while he lived in Eretz Canaan, before the onslaught of Yosef began, before the episode of Yosef began. But then Hashem wanted to give him an altogether different tranquility. The question is, if Hashem wanted to give him this tranquility from the world, to tranquility that usually reigns in the world to come, if that's what Hashem wanted to give him in the first place, then why did he wait to Yaakov daven for it, for Yaakov asking for it? Hashem could have given it this entire episode with Yosef, without Yaakov asking for it. And yet Hashem waited until Yaakov asked for it, and only then he launched the episode of Yosef, which inevitably gave Yaakov this tranquility in Egypt. And the Rebbe explains, and we examine this from the inward perspective, that as our sages say in the Talmud, Hashem desires the davening of the tzaddikim. Hashem longs for, he desires the davening of tzaddikim. And therefore, so long as Yaakov didn't ask to sit in tranquility, he was not granted the tranquility that he was worthy of. But only when Yaakov asked to sit in tranquility, to serve Hashem out of tranquility, then we could say over here, Bikesh, it says he asked. That's why the Torah says he asked. Because it doesn't say that Yaakov wanted, this is what he was looking for in life. He asked. Who did he ask? He asked Hashem. One of the verbiages for davening is asking. Not only once he asked, his request was fulfilled, but even more so, as we spoke, Hashem gave him the request that he didn't even know he wanted. In other words, he made a vessel for it by davening, and then Hashem blessed him, but Hashem blessed him with the ultimate tranquility once he went through the onslaught of Yosef. From here, we learn a foundational principle in serving Hashem in our time. Okay, so the Rebbe says that from all of this, we could seek and learn a lesson in our divine service, and especially in today's generation. How important it is to daven and ask Hashem for the Geula, for the redemption. That it is incumbent upon every single one of us to learn from Yaakov's conduct and ask to sit in tranquility. As we learned that what Yaakov asked was for a limited tranquility, but what Hashem gave him is the ultimate tranquility of the world to come. Why do we call it the world to come? Olam Haba. Because it's the world that is coming up upon us when Mashiach comes. In other words, it's this world, but the world manifesting in its complete form. In other words, with God openly being revealed through the world, in the world, and discernible from within the context of the world in itself. So when Yaakov asked for this tranquility, from this we learn how important it is for us to ask Hashem for this tranquility, for the tranquility that Mashiach will come. In other words, not only we should ask, the Rebbe says, But we have to demand at this point, we have to demand from Hashem to bring Mashiach. As our sages says, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught that all those that died in the time of the thousands of who died in the war during the days of David, they only died because of one reason, because they never asked for Mashiach. They could have asked Hashem to bring Mashiach at that point already. And if they in that generation where they were close to the Beit HaMikdash, if they died because of this, how much more so was us that we're so far, we're in Golus for thousands of years, and we have to demand even more so now than ever before, and that's why we daven in the Amidah several times a day for Mashiach. There are several prayers in the Amidah that ask Hashem directly for the Beit HaMikdash, to bring Mashiach, etc., etc. As we said, Hamashiv Shechinato LeTzion, that Hashem will bring back His Shechina back to Tzion, to Yerushalayim, to the Beit HaMikdash, and to be able. And we ask Hashem even before we begin the Psukei Zivra, we already ask Hashem to restore the Beit HaMikdash, so we could start giving the korbanot in reality, not just mouth service. And we ask Hashem in the Amidah Boneh V'Rachamav Yerushalayim, that we in benching, we ask Hashem to rebuild and restore the Beit HaMikdash Yerushalayim out of His mercy. In other words, we're davening constantly, every single day we're davening, the sages enacted this davening, so we will constantly be asking Hashem for Mashiach. But it's imperative for us, and that's why the sages put it there, because we have to ask for it. Hashem will not bring Mashiach until we genuinely want it. As we spoke about yesterday in last night's class, that on one hand, Hashem wants to give us tranquility, but on the other hand, Hashem wants it to come from us. There's a concept in Judaism called bread of shame. That Hashem, there are many questions. Yesterday, actually, we translated Yaakov's letter, and the Rebbe explained over there that one of Hashem's biggest kindness is to create a world that one can earn their keep. In other words, the way that Hashem created us, Hashem recognized that we don't want anything for free, that we don't like free handouts. As the sage says, a person prefers one measure of his own effort, what he gained from his own effort, than 9 measures of his friend that just came to him without effort. It's a very interesting story when we think about it. It's a parenthetical over here, that by the time of the Baal Shem Tov, there was a very, very wealthy person, but he was somewhat stingy with his philanthropy. And there was a certain pauper who came to him, genuinely hungry and destitute, knocked on his door, and asked to help. But at that point, he turned him away. The pauper left very hungry, and walking towards his next destination, by Hashgacha Patit, he found a coin on the floor, a golden coin. The pauper came to the Baal Shem Tov to ask what to do with this coin. And the Baal Shem Tov suggested to him to invest it, to go to the market, to buy some produce, and then to reinvest it and to sell it, and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what the pauper did. He invested it, he made some profit off of it, and immediately he came back to the Baal Shem Tov and asked him what should he do next. And the Baal Shem Tov told him again, reinvest it, and so on and so forth. Within the span of the year, this pauper became one of the most wealthiest people in the town. But Bad Bevad, at the very same time, the the rich person, the stingy rich person, his fortune turned sour. Week by week, he started losing his money. Eventually, by the end of the year, the formerly rich person was now himself in destitute. And at this point, he couldn't contain himself anymore. He came to the Baal Shem Tov, the formerly rich person, and asked, what happened? He said, Hashem sent you someone to give you an opportunity to either maintain and grow your wealth, but you turned them away, so you started the circle of life. When one is on the top, the other one's on the bottom. Before, you were on the top, but by denying him tzedakah, you turned that wheel where he turned to the top and you came to the bottom. He says, so now what do I do? He says to him, well, there's only one opportunity you have to fix this. You have to come to the former pauper who is now rich and ask him for tzedakah, and if he turns you away, he will turn the wheel right back to where it was before. So now, the formerly rich person devised a plan. Now that the rich person has money, now he can marry off his daughters. And now he could afford a lavish wedding. And to scholars that he would be able to support while they're learning. So the formerly rich person had a plan. He waited until the chuppah of the daughter of the now rich person, and in the middle of the chuppah ceremony, as the rabbi is reading the ketubah, the formerly rich person now comes and disrupts and pushes through the guests, very rudely and on purpose, that is, pushes through all the guests, and comes and pushes the parents aside, comes in front of the chatan and kala, and turns to the father and says, tzedakah, now. Like he did in the most obstinate way, obnoxious way, in order for him to basically turn him away. But now he's completely disheveled. Nobody's recognizing who this guy is anymore. He's completely disheveled. He hasn't taken a bath. Back then you didn't have private homes, private showers, you had to go to bathhouses and pay for that. So if you didn't have money, you couldn't take baths. So nobody recognized him anymore. And here is this rude pauper just walking in and to the chuppah and disrupting the entire ceremony. It's one thing in the wedding hall, in the party, that's one thing. But in the chuppah itself. But without even thinking about it, the father went to his pocket and gave him everything that he had. And the now pauper fainted on the spot because he realized his fate was sealed. The Baal Shem Tov told him he only has one opportunity. When he woke up, the father of the bride, the former pauper who was now rich, was standing by him and tried to give him drinks. And so he says, what happened? Why are you so anxious? And he says, you don't recognize me, but a year ago you came to me for a donation and I turned you away. And as the Baal Shem Tov told me afterwards, I turned the circle of life around, and where you were launched to the top and I descended downwards. And the Baal Shem Tov told me that the only way to be able to turn my fortune around is to come to you and for you to deny me. But you did deny me, so my fate is sealed. I'll be destitute for the rest of my life. At that point, the now wealthy person says, you don't have to be destitute. I have on my property a house that I made it for guests. But you know what? You could have this house. You could live in there. It's yours so long as you need it. You could work together with me on my property, and you'll be just fine. And that's how it was. Later on, the students of the Baal Shem Tov asked him, the Baal Shem Tov Rebbe, you said that if he doesn't deny him, then he is going to be destitute for the rest of his life. Over here, you see that he has a house now, and he has a little bit of income coming in. And the Rebbe says, over here is different. It's not his money. it's the rich person's money he is living off of. He didn't earn it. He is living off of the chesed of someone else. It was very different. Parenthetically, it was just like a interesting nekuda to think about when people come to you. How prudent. You don't know why Hashem sent this particular person at this day, in this moment. You have no idea. You just think that somebody from nowhere just coming. Everything's divine providence. Anyway, Hashem created the world that every person has the ability to work and earn their life force that Hashem gives us. Nothing here Hashem set up is for free. Free is what the Klippa wants and the other side wants. And wants give me without putting any effort. Have, give.
Rabbi, is that what bread of shame means?
Yeah. Bread of shame means to get bread that you didn't earn. It doesn't mean that you earn directly this bread, but you went out and made a vessel. So long as you went out and made a vessel for Hashem's purpose, is not in shame. But you have to earn, you have to work, you have to make a vessel for Hashem's blessing. It's very important, by the way, to know, I was learning this yesterday, I was relearning this yesterday actually, that it's very important to know that our jobs don't pay us. Our work doesn't pay us. Who pays us? Hashem. It doesn't say 6 days you should work and the 7th go collect your paycheck. It mentions nothing about your paycheck. It does say that Hashem shall bless you in all that you will do. Which means, over here in this pasuk, there's a fusion of two worlds. Hashem will bless you. In other words, the blessing will come from Hashem directly. But in the world that what you do in this world. But it's not that your deed is what earns you your parnasah. Your deed is just a vessel in which Hashem wants to send His divine influence and influx through a physical vessel, because Hashem desires to dwell within the physical. And so Hashem wants us to make a vessel in this world in order to bring down His blessing, in order to bring down, draw, and materialize His blessing. But it's Hashem's blessing that makes us rich. At the same time, by the way, and it's very important to put this, Maimonides writes regarding idol worship. That how did idol worship come about? That initially it came about in the generation of Enosh, which wasn't too far after the generation of Noach. The generation that began with idol worship, the Rambam writes, weren't looking to worship idols. They firmly believed in God. They believed that God is the God and He creates the world. The Rambam writes that they made a mistake, a logical mistake. What was the mistake? That they believed falsely that just like God is the king and the king has ministers, so too Hashem has ministers that conduct this world. The sun, the moon, the wind, and other powers. In other words, there are forces that Hashem designated as His ministers, and He sends His influx through them. At the same time, they believe that God is that God created the moon and the sun and all those, but they believe that they too have a significant presence. Just like even though the citizens of the empire, the subject of the king, obviously pledge allegiance and are completely and utterly nullified to the king, but because of their allegiance to the king and nullification, they also recognize when the king sends a minister of tax, of finances, for instance, you have to heed respect, you have to give respect to him. You can't just ignore because he's coming on behalf of the king. Over here, that's where their mistake was. That they believe that these are ministers of the king and they have some sort of intrinsic, inherent power that the king bestowed upon them, and therefore you also have to appease them as well. So the different constellation, the sun and the moon and so on and so forth. The next generation, the Rambam writes, those who made the mistake said, well, those constellations and the moon and the sun are just too far in the heavens. It's very difficult to connect to them down here. We should make images of these constellations, of these forces, and bring them home so we could be able to see it and be able to connect to it much more intensely. Again, they still believe that God is God, but they furthered their mistake. The next generation forgot about that there was a God. Only the constellation, the statues in front of them, bore significance. And the generation after that arose prophets, quote unquote, that claimed to prophesize in the name of these constellations, in the name of these gods. And then started the threats. If you don't want the sun to stop shining, then you better give offerings, and you better give, and then started the punishment. If you don't, we're going to kill you. And that's how idolatry began. Why is it for us? It's a complete idolatry. Why? Because by us, we are not allowed to have any means between us and God. That's an insult. It's one thing a subject in the country has to turn to one of the secretaries of the king or a minister of the king to get the king's attention. But it's altogether insulting to the empire if the prince has to go through a secretary to get the king's attention. So non-Jews are allowed to believe that Hashem has partners. For them, for Ben Noach, they're allowed to practice Christianity if they believe that Yashka is the Mashiach, if they believe that Yashka is a son of a God, or whatever it is, or even a partner with God. But they're not allowed to. But Catholicism is altogether idolatry because they believe that Yashka is God, that is God in a human being. But aside from Islam and Christianity, they could practice their religion so long as they also keep the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, which is part and parcel of the religion for the most part, except for when they deviate and they decide to murder at will. But aside from that, they're allowed to believe. We're not allowed to believe it. Now, why am I saying this? We know when a person commits to an extra hour of work for overtime in order to get a little bit more money, that's borderline idolatry. Because if you have an obligation, the Torah obligates us to go to work. The Torah obligates us to go to work. It's an obligation, just like Shabbat is an obligation, 6 days of work is an obligation. But the purpose of the work is to refine the world. That's the real reason why Hashem sends us to certain locales at certain times, as is brought down in one of our books, in Sefer Chassidim, from Yehuda Chassid, Yehuda the Pious, was written over 1,000 years ago, which he asked, why does Hashem designate that certain people could find work immediately in their vicinity, and some people have to travel continents to make their earning? Why didn't Hashem just give parnasa to every single person exactly in their place? Save them time, save them schlepping. The explanation is because the work, the draw to go to work is there because Hashem realizes that we're not altruistic creatures that will just walk around the earth looking for what sparks belong to us. So Hashem gives us, so to say, an ulterior reason why to go to a certain locale, a certain places, because over there's a spark that belongs to our soul. And over there, we come there every day to elevate the spark that belongs to us and engaging other people, engaging material, same blessings, same psukim, and then we elevate the place, we elevate the people, we elevate the items, and so on and so forth. But that's the real reason why we're there. When we do that, we're making also a vessel for Hashem's influx. But it's not that the work in itself brings down the influx. It's just Hashem wanted it to come in such a way. But if you're making a vessel and you don't get over here, you'll get it somewhere else. Because once you've made a vessel, you don't have to perfect the vessel. You just got to make the vessel for Hashem's blessing. But once you make the vessel, Hashem will already make sure you get from here. Because everything's already decided on Rosh Hashanah what you're going to make. And if it could come from here, it could come here, that's up to Hashem. Nobody can take your money, nobody can take your parnasa, because whatever is decided is from Hashem. Why am I saying this? Because not only applies to work, it also applies to medicine. If a person takes a Tylenol and it says that Tylenol cured me from my headache, that's borderline idol worship. That's like saying that this has some intrinsic power over me, and it could cure me from my ailment. So you're ascribing some inherent power to this thing. It has no power whatsoever. It's just that Hashem decided that these arrangement of chemicals, each chemical has its own divine spark, its own code that makes it, that Hashem gave it, how it has to work, and so on and so forth. And the arrangement of these sparks will be able to make a vessel in which Hashem's blessing of healing will come through it.
So the vessel of the Tylenol?
So over there, but if the Tylenol, it doesn't have to be Lavdavka. I think we mentioned before, there was a tzaddik, the Rebbe actually told his son that he was one of the 36 hidden tzaddikim. His name was Dr. Zeligson. He's buried by the Ohel. And he was, the Rebbe would send students from 770 to him. But he would, like one of my friends, I guess, he's older than me by about 15, 20 years, but is someone I met when I was a rabbi in Cleveland. His name is Levi Greenberg. He actually grew up with Rabbi Kaczynski and my cousin. They were in the same class. And he told me that when he was in 770, once he was diagnosed with pneumonia. And he wanted to come to the Rebbe's Farbrengen, but he couldn't. So he sent a message from one of the Bachim who came by the Rebbe by dollars to ask a refuah, a bracha for healing. And the Rebbe sent his friend to tell Reb Levi to go to Dr. Zeligson, and he'll already take care of him. So he went to Dr. Zeligson. Dr. Zeligson gave him a cup of orange juice. And within 2 hours he was healed. Because it's not the item itself. The item is just a vessel. If it doesn't come one way, it'll come another way. You've got to make a vessel for it. That's all. Not obsess over the vessel. As a matter of fact, obsessing over the vessel will cover up the blessing. That's why to take an extra hour, it's one thing if you're a doctor and you're healing, but if that hour belongs to your family or to go to learn, to have a class or to davening, and you're making an extra hour just to make an extra parnasah, so you're ascribing some power to your boss, to the work, that it could better your fortune if you take away from something else, which doesn't work that way. How did we get to this? Oh, I know how we got to this. Okay. This is what we took in the scenic route, I guess. But Hashem wants us to ask. Hashem desires our davening. Now, in order for Yaakov to have received the tranquility, Yaakov had to go through the Rugza Shel Yosef, the onslaught of Yosef, in order to completely and utterly humble him, as we spoke about last night in the previous classes. However, the Rebbe says, in our generation, we don't have to go through any other negativity. And if the Rebbe said this already in the 80s, this talk was said in the 80s, and if the Rebbe said this already because we've been through so much traumas, we've been through so many decrees, we've been through the thick and thin, we went through the Holocaust, and we had pogroms, and so on and so forth. In our last generation, we went through so many onslaughts. So we don't have to go through this anymore. Hashem desires the davening of Israel that we should ask Hashem for the Geula. As Bikesh Leisha B'Shava, that Yaakov asked to sit in tranquility. When we ask and demand from Hashem to bring the Geula, the redemption, this actually, each time we ask, it actually hastens the Geula, it brings it closer. When you think about this, You would think that yesterday I asked for it, it didn't come, and a week ago, and a year ago, so what's the difference I ask? But each time we ask, and especially if we really mean it, again, Yaakov didn't ask for this tranquility because he was looking to be spared from any further trouble, or he was looking to be able to finally have some quiet time in his life. Yaakov was asking for tranquility in order to be able to serve Hashem on the most pristine level. So too, when we ask for the Geula, it's okay to ask when we see calamities occur to the Jewish people. God forbid, when we see the tragedies and so on and so forth, of course we should ask Hashem how much more of this. But that's not the reason why we desire Geula. We desire the Geula, the redemption, in order for us to be able to serve Hashem in the most pristine manner possible. And so we should ask Hashem, Hashem, you created us to serve you. You created us, as it says in Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim es haaretz. In the beginning, Hashem created the heavens and the earth. But Bereshit, as we spoke about many times, Bet Reshit, for two core reasons that Hashem created the world. For the Torah and for Israel. Hashem created the world for the Torah and for Israel. Namely, that the Jewish people, through diligently learning the Torah and occupying ourselves with mitzvot, we will heal the world and bring Mashiach. So we can say to Hashem, Hashem, you created the world for two reasons. Torah and for the Jewish people. So we're not asking you for tranquility, we're not asking for Mashiach because exile is terrible. We're asking you for Mashiach so we could serve you and complete the desire for which you created the world and you created us. As the Chidah brings down, that even if, and this is so powerful, even if the only zchut, the only merit that we have is the fact that we're only desire Mashiach, that we're hoping the Mashiach, that would be sufficient enough to bring Mashiach already. In other words, even if our Torah mitzvot are not as pristine as they should, and especially not in our generation, our davening is not like Mendel's davening, it's not like Kitchen and Masma's davening, it's not like. But if the only merit that we have is that we haven't given up hope on Mashiach, and not only that, we hope every day to bring Mashiach, the Mashiach will come. The Chidah says that's sufficient enough for Hashem to tip the scales and bring Mashiach. As we say in the davening, this is what the Chidah was explaining. In the davening, we say "Etzamach David avdecha mehera tatzmiach," that the plant of David, that the shoot of David immediately grow. In other words, that the Mashiach should come immediately. And we say at the end, "Ki lishuatcha kivinu kol hayom," because we hope for your salvation all day long. So the Chidah says, it's the effect and the cause. Bring Mashiach because we hope for your salvation every day. So the fact that we're hoping for salvation is the very reason why you should bring Mashiach. In other words, even if we cannot serve in the most pristine manner, and even if, God forbid, we have deficits, nevertheless, ask for Mashiach, beg for Mashiach, demand for Mashiach. Each time we give a little tzedakah, say, Hashem, bring Mashiach for this, in the merit of tzedakah. Each time we are davening, we're learning, we say, Hashem, bring Mashiach for this, the merit. Everything that we do, we should say, bring Mashiach for this. It's not enough just to say Mishet Beirach, where we say Tehillim. We should also should say, and Hashem, of course, bring Mashiach. There will be no more sick people. Or we should say that this person should have a complete recovery and see Mashiach and bring him immediately. In other words, we should tie everything that we do to Mashiach. And we should ask for it in words, we should ask for it with actions. I think we brought this story once. The Helike Ruzhiner, the holy Ruzhiner, Israel of Ruzhin, when he was a child, he once saw, and the Rebbe brings this in the talk, he once saw that his father was holding an apple, and when he turned to his father and asked for the apple, and the father, for whatever reason, denied him the apple. So he asked him again, and again he denied him. He was about 5 years old. So the Ruzhiner just said the blessing, Baruch atah Hashem elokei haolam borei pri ha'etz. Now, if his father doesn't give him the apple, it's going to be a blessing in vain. You are not allowed to make a blessing in vain. So now the father gave the little child the apple because the son sort of forced his hand. He says you're wise beyond your years. But the Rebbe brought this that we sort of have to turn Hashem's hand in this. We have to demand for this and start acting as though Mashiach is here. In other words, what it means that Mashiach is here? No more limitations. Who's stopping you from being a proud Jew, from being a happy Jew? Yeah, there are different difficulties, fine. But as we learned before, that's not you. You're not the difficulties. As painful as it may be, that's not you. You're not the difficulties. You're not the pain. You're not the suffering. You're the one who's experiencing, for whatever reason, so long as we're in Galut. But you are the light. And so we, no matter what happens, we could always serve Hashem with happiness and pristine and so on and so forth. And so especially now, who's stopping us from being proud Jews? Who's stopping us from eating kosher and keeping kosher to the utmost or keeping Shabbat to the utmost? No one. We're literally living in the days of Mashiach. There's no one who's chasing us for our Judaism. And certainly if Am Yisrael would get together and proudly stand up for Torah and mitzvot, no one in the world would say anything as well. As Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs Alav Shalom once said, that the Goyim love a Jew who bows down out of fear and lays down and let the world trample upon him. But the Goyim respect a Jew who respects Judaism. If we stood tall and kept the mitzvot, walked around with the kippah, walked around with the tzitzit, and kept the mitzvot, have a set time to learn every single day, and keep Shabbat, the entire world will be subside to us. Not that we're going to rule them, but they would subside to godliness. They wouldn't reject it. So over here, on a daily basis, we should live like Mashiach is here. With tzedakah, give the most. With the learning, we should learn as much as possible. When it comes to Avat Yisrael, as though there's no more Yetzirah, just love every single Jew, no matter what. In other words, nothing is stopping us anymore, except for, as the Rebbe said, muscle memory. It's as though we're still going through the motions of Galut. But in reality, the Galut, as we know it, already stopped a while ago. And nevertheless, the Rebbe says that we have to demand every single day. In a different talk, and it's a very famous talk, in 1985, Yud Beit Tammuz, Parsa Pinchas, the Rebbe brought a novelty from the Rogachovi Gaon, the genius of Rogachev, Rabbi Yosef. He was a very, very, very big Rav. He's one of the Rabbanim who gave the Rebbe rabbinical ordinations. Anyway, the Rogachovi says that anyone who's in his generation or her generation, the Beit HaMikdash was not restored, is as if in their generation it was destroyed. In other words, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash wasn't a one-time occurrence that occurred thousands of years ago. But in every generation, in every day, in every instant that the Beit HaMikdash was not restored, is as if right now is destroyed. And therefore, every single second, a person has to ask, and it says, even if you had a heart of stone and you watch the Beit HaMikdash burning, won't you take buckets of water to your best and try to extinguish the fire? Here, the Rebbe says that we asked Masa yesterday, how much more yesterday, the day before, but we're coming to, it's as though we could live another day that Mashiach didn't come. And we're okay with it. We could make Galut plans and what's going to happen in 10 years from now, my retirement. Rabbi Shlomo Kunin, the head shaliach of California, is a truly magnificent human being. He would come to, he still comes every single Shabbat Mevarchim to 770, and always the first thing he would do when he comes to 770, he'd come to Reb David's office, and he would put Reb David's hand on his head, and Reb David would give him a bracha, and then he would ask me to leave the room, and they would have a private audience. Reb David was his mentor. once he told me, we sat down, and he told me an amazing. He's accomplished a lot. Understand? He's accomplished a lot. But he's a very eccentric human being, to put it mildly. He doesn't calculate with anything or anybody. He just does, whether he understands it or not. Well, I mean, whether people get it or not, he just does. He said that once, when he was in 770, a young man who just got married came knocking on the door. He stays, when he is in 770, he stays in the WLCC room, the radio room where they would transmit the hookup. You remember we came there? So he puts on a little cot, and that's where he stays over Shabbat. And while he's there, he's on the phone constantly with people and so on and so forth. But when he is there, he's not to be bothered. Then, Shabbat morning, he gives a discourse. There's a whole entire thing. We could forget about this for days. But once he said, while he was in his room, a young man who just recently got married came knocking on his door. And Rabbi Kunin opened up and says, yes, what do you need? He says, I want to go on shlichus. I want to come out to California, if possible, to be a rabbi, to be an emissary. And Rabbi Kunin was sort of like apprehensive. But he says, okay, so tell me what are your requirements? He says, well, for the first 5 years, I would like to have a salary of $150,000 a year, and he's giving his terms and conditions. And Rabbi Kunin says, hold on, how many kids you have? He said, no, I just got married. So he says, $150,000 a year, what is that for? He says, well, I don't want to come as a schlepper to start going to having to fundraise. I want to come in strong, immediately put the money down at Chabad house. And then over time, I'll be able to, even if you want to loan me the money, I'll be able to repay you. Within 5 years, I'll be able to repay you. He says, 5 years you'll repay me. He says, you're telling me now that your aim is to go on shlichus and still be in galut in 5 years from now. You're not a shaliach. Leave the office and leave 770 immediately. You don't belong in shlichut. A shaliach can't go out like thinking that I've my 5-year galut plan. The whole entire point is to bring Mashiach immediately. A few months pass, and this young man ends up in California, Rabbi's house. He comes knocking at Rabbi Kunin's house, which is really brazen. Really brazen. And Rabbi Kunin says, what are you doing here? What kind of chutzpah do you have to come to my house after I told you? He says, I learned from you, Rabbi Kunin. You know, when you want something, you don't stop. And I really wanted it. I know it's chutzpah. I didn't ask you, but I bought the ticket. I came over here with my wife. Is it possible? Maybe something. I'm so sorry, and so on and so forth. I didn't mean it. He says, okay. I myself interviewed with Rabbi Kunin, and he actually hired me to go to Ohio. But then Mrs. Kazin came in the day after I was hired and made me go to Ohio, which is. But he tells you the way he works is when you come to him, and he's in LA, he sends you to any of the remote cities, and you have to go there and you have to explore the city. And when you're ready, you come back to him and you give him your impressions. And then if you liked it, and if he thinks that you're qualified, then he says go to the Rebbe, write in for a bracha, and then. So anyway, this guy comes to Rabbi Kunin and he says, "Listen, I learned it from you. You said I see that whenever you want something, you don't take a no. So I came here. I know it's chutzpah, but I'm here. We bought the tickets. Is there anything?" So Rabbi Kunin says, "Okay, there's a remote city. Go and explore it, and come back to me and let me know what you think." And so Rabbi Kunin, the next day, the couple came back to Rabbi Kunin. And he says, "No, what do you think?" He asked them. He says, "It's a very nice city, but in my downtime, while I'm studying Kollel, I did research on the statistics in California, and I noticed that you have another city that there's a demographic which I'm much more equipped to deal with, and I have a greater interest in dealing with them." So I know there's no rabbi there. This is a nice city, but according to Google, I'm much more fitted for this other city. Rabbi Kunin told him, he says, and did Google show you the soul that's been waiting for you for 5,762 years for you to come and elevate it? Does Google show you those sparks as well? I told you don't belong to Shlichus, leave and never come back to California. And that's the end of the story. In other words, we are sent into this world. We don't know why we're sent. Each one of us has a mission. But certainly to be okay with galut, with exile, to have a 5-year exile plan, it's one thing. The Rebbe did say that we learn from the Mishkan, from our traveling in the desert, that when we settled in any locale, whether it for 24, 48 hours or for 18, 19 years, doesn't matter how short or long we were there, immediately we would assemble the Mishkan and start serving there immediately. It doesn't matter if it's overnight or for years and years. So to the Rebbe explains, wherever we're stationed, we have to be fully present and fully serving instead of the Mishkan and so on and so forth. When it comes time to leave, then we have to do a similar move according to Hashem's plan, according to Hashem's directive. So it's okay because people ask the Rebbe, you're saying the Mashiach is going to come, and they asked in the previous Rebbe too, and you say Mashiach is coming any day, what's the point of making institutions and fundraising for things? If he's coming tomorrow, then what's the point? And the Rebbe says, well, that whenever he comes, then we pick up and leave immediately. But until that moment, we have to be very much present. Incidentally, we also have an amazing story from our Rebbe and the previous Rebbe like this. Once the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe explains what is mastering time look like. He said that the Rebbe once related that he was with his father-in-law, and they're in somewhere, I think in Riga or somewhere in Europe, and his father, the previous Rebbe, had a very important trip to accomplish a very important mission that day, and he was supposed to leave in 30 minutes. When the Rebbe walked in, he saw that the previous Rebbe is sitting and writing very calmly, as though nothing's happening, there's no rush or anything like that. As soon as the 30 minutes were up, he put the quilt down, closed the book, grabbed the luggage, and walked out. He says that's called mastering time. That you're present till the last second, and then when the activity needs to change, you get up immediately and you move. The same goes when it comes to exile. We have to be able to let go of exile. We have to be able to let go of the exile mentality. That nobody is chasing our Judaism anymore, nobody is threatening us. We've seen over and over, when a Jew wants to keep Torah mitzvot, then nothing will stop him. Tell you a story, an amazing, amazing story. After the revolution, 1979, when the hostages were taken by the Iranians, there was a negotiation to go a humanitarian visit with the American hostages, and there was a question who could visit them, and it was agreed that clergy could also visit them as well. Now the question is, which clergy should visit? And amongst the Jews, the Rebbe pushed for the head rabbi of Mexico, Rabbi Wurzburger, to be the one to visit them. And the Iranians agreed to it. This was in July, I believe, summertime. The rabbi, before going to Iran, stopped by the Rebbe and for a blessing to be successful. And the Rebbe told him, gave him a bracha, and says don't forget to bring the menorah. And he knew not to ask. The Rebbe says something, you don't. So he just accepted. But he left over there puzzled. Menorah, it was July. We're not. By the time he was about to board the plane, he was notified that the meeting has been canceled because there was disagreement, and they don't know when it's gonna. Whenever it's going to resume, whenever they're going to sit and agree, they're going to notify him. Anyway, they notified him right before Hanukkah that he is flying on Hanukkah. That he's going to be there on Hanukkah. And so he brought the menorah, just like the Rebbe told him. He brought the menorah and he lit it. There's a whole story about the lighting, the whole entire thing. But why am I bringing this? Because that Friday he was invited to the general prayer that the Shah was overseeing with ministers. There are thousands of people in the courtyard. They're all praying, and the clergy that was brought from different locations, they also needed to be part of it. And the Shah and his ministers are overseeing all of this, and then they see that while all the Muslims are bowing down, he didn't bow down. He remained standing. So immediately, the Shah sent one of his officers to retrieve Rabbi Wurzburger. And the rabbi became sort of anxious. You know, like anything could go wrong, it could go sideways every single second now. The Shah asked the rabbi, why didn't you bow down? He said, I didn't bow down because I don't know what you're saying. I don't know the words you're saying. I don't know if I'm allowed to bow down to this. I only bow down to God. I'm not sure who you're davening about, but I'm not allowed to bow down. I hold and I maintain that I only serve Hashem. The Shah was really taken aback by this. Really, really taken aback by this. Yeah.
Do you mean Ayatollah or the Shah?
The Ayatollah, I'm sorry. The Ayatollah. He was really taken aback by this. And he said, I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed. There's also a story like that with the Tanya, where the Rebbe requested that the Tanyas will be printed over there in Iran, right there. There's a whole entire story with that. But he asked him, what could I do for your people? And he said, allow them to put on tefillin. And he allowed it. He allowed it. A non-Jew respects a Jew that respects Judaism. When we stand up confident, no one could put us down. We have to realize that we're no longer in exile as we were 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. We're not in Iran, we're not in Russia, we're not in 1940s America, we're here. We have all the affordability to be proud Jews and serve with happiness. And we have all the affordability to have Jewish education for our children, authentic Jewish education, not diluted kosher-like food, but actual kosher food, and so on and so forth. We're able to keep Shabbat. We're able to keep all the mitzvot. Nobody is stopping us. We have to accept that we're in a new reality, and in the same time demand that Hashem, this is not enough. This is not enough. We are worn out from Galut. And we only want Galut to answer. We could serve you in the most magnificent way. And Hashem desires that. Hashem waits for that. The Rebbe once said the Mashiach is waiting. He said that his father-in-law, the Rebbe said that his father-in-law, who was the Mashiach of the generation, that the Mashiach of the generation is waiting waiting impatiently to redeem the Jewish people, but he has to have self-sacrifice not to redeem the Jewish people. The Rebbe says, why the self-sacrifice not to redeem Jewish people? Because the Rebbe is the Yechida Shel Yechida. He is the Yechida of all the souls. He is the head of all the souls. And all the souls are included within him. But he also, and he doesn't procrastinate, he knows his purpose in this world. That his entire purpose is to redeem the Jewish people. But he also recognizes that Hashem wants the redemption to come from us, not from above to below, but rather from below to above. Because previous times we had the first Beit, we had the Mishkan, another tabernacle, another tabernacle. Then we had the first Beit Hamikdash, the second, and we lost every single one of them. So Hashem says, now it has to come from you. You need to want it. It has to come that you demand from it. And so too, we have to come to understand that we need, that's why the Rebbe said we want Mashiach now. And the Rebbe explains why we want, because it has to come from a desire. And why is it now? The Rebbe actually explained what now, even though it was a chant from camp, it was a song that was introduced from camp, the Rebbe explained that everything divine providence, even the word now is the way it's spelled in Hebrew, has a humongous significance. Either way, we have to want it. And we have to tie every single thing that we do, when we give tzedakah, when we light Shabbat candles, when we learn, when every single thing, Hashem, bring Mashiach. And the Rebbe finishes his talk by saying, of course, and it's so simple, that when Bnei Yisrael will ask correctly to sit with tranquility, then immediately, as the Rambam himself writes, that the request of the Jewish people, may our eyes behold your return to Zion out of mercy, that we'll be able to settle and be able to relax and be tranquil and relax in a tranquil settlement in Eretz, in the land of his father's sojourn, like Yaakov asked to sit in Eretz Israel. Simply, and we're talking Begashmius, down here, Mashiach will come.